Hello guys, Nat Blue here. Today we are going to be looking at the new spells for the 2024 Player's Handbook. This is a video posted by Dungeons and Dragons onto their YouTube page. So if you're interested in the video, you can definitely also check it out over there. I just want to jump right into this. I've been very curious about the spells since they announced the new Player's Handbook. I want to see how they've changed some stuff. So let's look at what these guys got for us today.
There are a lot of spells, there are new spells, and there's been some upgrades.
Ooh, look at that artwork. We're going to move me away for a minute because, um, God, that looks so sick. So it's a wizard shooting what looks like maybe magic missile. To me, it looks like magic missile. The staff itself looks pretty sick. I like that they have the spell book like buckled to the belt. They have some scrolls holstered on their belt, and it looks like they have mage armor on, and that is probably the coolest iteration of mage armor I've ever seen. I always see it as like a translucent gold armor, and I think that blue armor just fits the wizard so well. If that is a wizard, I mean, it looks like it is because he's got a spell book and a pointy hat. So love that artwork. I keep getting derailed by the artwork, but Wizards of the Coast really did an amazing job with the artwork for this new Player's Handbook. I've been very happy so far. And the covers for the other core rule books coming out with this new edition also look amazing. So I've been very impressed with how well Wizards of the Coast has handled artwork for this.
As well.
This spell chapter is massive. It has even more spells than the spell chapter of the 2014 Player's Handbook. It has at least 30 more spells than that chapter had. And all of the returning spells have been revisited and in some cases have received functional upgrades that deal more damage now, or they heal more if they're a healing spell, or the range has been extended, or a spell that required concentration before no longer does, or it didn't require concentration but it does now. There is a ton going on in this chapter. We have also gone through all of the spells to see how we can improve how easy it is to use them in play. We, based on a decade of questions about various spells, have essentially embedded the answers.
Is that Way of Frost? Because that's a pretty sick picture also. That might be Way of Frost.
To the most common rules questions
Yeah.
about the spells into the spells themselves. So I think also people will find that even if a spell's functionality hasn't changed, that it will be easier for them to use because their most frequently asked questions are now answered in the spell itself.
Right.
There's also more art of the spells than before.
Yeah, that's been amazing.
So you're going to get to see more of the spells in use. And a lot of the spells have been tightened up.
Was that Acid Splash maybe? Because that looked pretty cool. This? Acid Splash, I think. I don't think it's Poison Spray because if we go back to it, it looks like it's kind of torn the skin away from these fellas. So I feel like that's an Acid Splash.
One of the things we did is in some cases, the spells do more but with fewer words. And we were on the hunt to see how many words can we squeeze out of some of these so that you can get to the meat of the spell faster. We wanted you to be able to, when going through this massive chapter, not only find the spell that you want to cast easily, but then when you're reading it, get to the heart of what that spell does without too much fuss. We've also upgraded the presentation of the spells by including in the spells themselves a list of the classes that have a particular spell on their lists. So for example, if a spell is a wizard spell, its description tells you that it's a wizard spell.
Yeah.
This is going to make spell selection way easier because you no longer are going to have to flip back and forth between a spell list elsewhere in the book and the spells themselves when you're trying to figure out what spells you want your paladin or your ranger or your wizard or your warlock or what have you, when you're making your spell selection, you can just look through the spell chapter and you can see right up there near the spell's name, this is a sorcerer spell or this is a wizard spell.
Instead of having to dig.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we also have taken the ritual tag and we have moved it out of that line underneath the spell's name, and it is now on the casting time line because the ritual tag primarily affects the casting time of a spell. We did that not only so that you can spot that immediately when you're looking at how long it takes to cast a particular spell to see if you have the option of casting it as a ritual, but also because we were putting more information up on that line higher up in the spell. We needed to get the ritual tag out of there.
Yeah.
Presentation improved, the clarity of the spells improved, functionality improved. Many spells have been buffed. There are also, in particular, a number of high-level damaging spells that have had their damage increased so that people will feel good about using them. Flame Strike now deals more damage, as do, and again, a number of other higher-level spells. There are new ways to use spells and then brand new spells. Would you like to hear about some of those?
I would love to hear about those.
So a number of the new spells, some of them people saw versions of them as a part of the Unearthed Arcana process. And also some of the new spells originally showed up in books like Xanathar's Guide or Tasha's Cauldron. But even spells that appeared in those books first that now are new spells in the Player's Handbook have often seen upgrades either in functionality or in clarity or both. One whole group of spells that are new to the Player's Handbook are summoning spells. And we took the summoning spells that were very popular from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, imported those into the Player's Handbook, and then upgraded them.
Yeah, there's even more options now, and this is one of my favorite things when it comes to the spells because it's just immediate. These have stat blocks in them. You don't have to go hunting through the monster manual. You have everything you need within that spell, and there are options within that spell.
And those stat blocks now also have the upgraded stat block format that appears not only in this book's creature appendix, but also in these spells. And so these monsters are going to be easy to use at the table. Most of these summoning spells also now have art, so people will get to see at least some of the versions of critters that you can summon with the spells. And I think these are going to be a ton of fun for people to use at the table.
I like that they've simplified the summoning spells a little bit. I hate using summoning spells, especially when I'm using it as like an NPC or a monster that has abilities to use a summoning spell, because then I have to prep all of the things they might summon, which is a lot of legwork.
You can summon a construct, you can summon dragons, you can summon undead. So virtually anything you would want to summon, and they come with a stat block in that spell.
Yes, and beasts, fae, it goes on and on. Now, because we included these summoning spells, we ended up redesigning the conjure spells that were in the 2014 Player's Handbook.
Right.
Because in the 2014 Player's Handbook, we had spells like Conjure Fae, Conjure Celestial, that sort of thing. And those versions had you fishing for stat blocks in the monster manual, and also, unfortunately, often resulted in a whole bunch of creatures showing up on the battlefield.
Taking up initiative.
Yeah. and they really tended to bog down play.
Yeah.
They were often a headache for dungeon masters. And so what we did, because this new summoning spells really fill the design niche of bringing a concrete creature onto the battlefield with a stat block, we redesigned all the conjuration spells that were like, again, conjure woodland beings, that kind of thing, so that they were really leaning into not the notion of bringing a concrete creature, but instead summoning these spirits of these creatures that help you in some way. So all of those spells have been redesigned, and people got to see those redesigns in the UA process and gave essentially thumbs up across the board. And so people will get to see the final versions of those revised conjure spells in the new Player's Handbook. In addition to the new summoning spells, the redesigned conjure spells, all of these other buffed spells, we also have some spells that we brought in and revised in support of some of our subclass design. Here's one example. The spell chapter now has the Dragon's Breath spell, which has appeared in 5th edition before, and we brought that in because we wanted to give it to the Draconic Sorcerer.
Of course.
And so there are a number of spells that have been added that are directly in support of classes and subclasses in the book. Another example of that is the new Elementalism cantrip, which we designed not only to support the Warrior of the Elements in the Monk, but also as an answer to the various elemental cantrips that we have published at different times in 5th edition. And we pondered bringing all of those cantrips into the Player's Handbook, but instead we decided to just design one cantrip that allows you to tap into the different elements to, create different elemental shapes and whatnot. We also have fun things like Steel Wind Strike that people have really enjoyed for the Ranger, now a part of the core game. And also spells that people have never seen before, not even in Unearthed Arcana. And these spells, a number of them are connected to named spellcasters in the D&D multiverse. We've already talked about in one of the videos Yolan's Regal Presence as one of these new spells, but we also have Jolarzi's Storm of Radiance. Jolarzi is one of the Circle of Eight, that same organization of wizards that Mordenkainen and Bigby are parts of, and she now has one of her named spells here in this book. It was also fun to include Jolarzi, not only because we could get one of her spells into the book, she also appears in art, and also, this will be of interest to you, Todd, as a lover of warlocks, Jolarzi is also notable in the Circle of Eight because she is a warlock, not a wizard, and she is specifically a celestial warlock.
Oh, boo.
and her spell is all about channeling this radiant power.
I didn't mean to boo Celestial Warlocks.
Celestial Warlock is awesome. We also have a...
Am I the only one that normally doesn't put the name in the spell? Unless it's something like Melf's Acid Arrow or the specific magic missile. Is it like Jim's? I feel like that might actually be right. But Melf's Acid Arrow, I put Melf in there because I think it's funny. It stands for male elf. And then things like Bigby's Hand, where you can't just say, I cast hand. But like a lot of the spells, like Tasha's Hideous Laughter, I normally just say Hideous Laughter. Or even though I love Tasha, unless there's a different version of the spell, I don't think it's necessary. So like the Magic Missile example, you have to specify because Magic Missile is its own spell. If the named spell is a version of a different spell, then it makes sense to put the name in there. Otherwise, I just don't use the name ever. And I wonder if I'm alone in that, maybe?
Brand new spell associated with Tasha. We have Tasha's Bubbling Cauldron.
Yeah.
A higher level spell that when you cast it, summons up a big cauldron and you can dip vials into it and get potions out of it.
Perfect.
Oh, that's cool. You could call it Bubbling Cauldron. The point that I just made. It doesn't have to be Tasha's Bubbling Cauldron. Okay. This sounds like a really cool spell. Because you can dip potions into it and everything. Tasha is such an iconic character. Does she need another named spell? she has a few now. Um, she probably has the most named spells in D&D, right? It's a lot. Except for maybe like Mordekainen, he has a lot of named spells, but I think Tasha has the most, right?
So this will now be the fastest way to get potions is with Tasha's Bubbling Cauldron. There are also favorites that have migrated into the book, like Toll the Dead. That cantrip is now part of the core game. Synaptic Static.
Yes.
We also have new cantrips that people got to see in Unearthed Arcana, like Starry Wisp and Sorceress Burst. Those have made it into the core game. Mind Spike, Mind Sliver, Ice Knife, Vitriolic Sphere, Word of Radiance. Those are among the spells that have now graduated to being in the game's main rulebook. We also, again, could probably talk for hours and won't about all of the spells that have had significant changes.
And there have been, right? Like some have had significant improvements. Maybe it's like something to do with action economy or wasn't quite hitting the sweet spot. Do you have a few examples of that?
Well, among my favorites are the improved healing spells. So healing spells have been upgraded, Cure Wounds, Healing Word, and so many others, so that now if you decide to spend your bonus action or action healing, you're going to, more often than not, feel better about doing so than you did before. We have some healing spells like Prayer of Healing that not only saw that sort of boost, but also now Prayer of Healing, with its 10-minute cast, lets people have the benefits of a short rest. Now, you can only enjoy that benefit once per day. Still, that is a major upgrade for that spell. People are also going to see cantrips like Blade Ward, Resistance, Guidance, having either different functionality or better functionality or both. Guidance, for example, you now choose a particular skill when you cast Guidance on a person, and you then concentrate, and while you're maintaining your concentration, the person will get a bonus to any ability check they make with the chosen skill. We've made it so that Resistance and Blade Ward might actually see use in play, since
I might be wrong here. Here, I'm going to switch for a second and Google 5e guidance because I 100% think if guidance works the way that I think it does, which it might not because I've never used it in anything other than Baldur's Gate. Um. So the way that guidance is worded in 5e, according to Roll20, is you touch one willing creature once before the spell ends. The target can roll a d4 and add the number rolled to one ability check of its choice. It can roll the die before or after making the ability check. The spell then ends. So the only improvement from what he was just saying is that you do not lose it after the spell ends. You lose it if the caster loses concentration. Otherwise, the spell is worse because the way that he said it is you get to pick a skill that they get to add a bonus to. The way that it currently is you can add the d4 bonus to any ability check of the creature's choice, which means that it's more effective than doing it for a specific ability. So is guidance worse? Am I the only one that has I mean, nobody says that nobody's mentioning it in the comments, which I don't understand. So I might be wrong here. Guidance might not be worse. It feels worse to me.
Those two cantrips have spent a whole lot of the last 10 years often not being used.
Yeah.
And that is something that was on our mind as we went through the spell list. It was not only seeing what spells are not delivering the power they should be delivering and making sure that they were, and in some very rare cases seeing which spells are over delivering, but then also seeing what spells have seen very little use, particularly lower level spells, and what can we do to really just make them more enticing. Then on the other end of the spectrum, when it comes to high level spells, we're less concerned about how often they're used because high level spells are often much more circumstantial. It's also rarer for people to be at the level where they can cast those spells, but it was still important to us to make sure that those spells, when you do get to be high enough level to cast them, or if you're a dungeon master and you're having a monster cast those spells, we wanted to make sure that they were delivering the goods for their level. And we also made sure that those spells were as clear as possible because some of those high level spells are complex, and we wanted to make sure that, when you finally get there and are able to cast those spells, you can actually decipher what the heck they're doing.
Right.
We also, in some families of spells, made sort of changes to the whole family. I already mentioned us making changes to the conjure family of spells. Similarly, we've made changes to the shape-shifting family of spells. So when you get to polymorph, shape change, true polymorph, you're going to see that.
I'm curious about the shape changing changes. That's not why I'm paused. It's because this still is probably going to leave soon. This is such a cool picture, but I wanted to talk about why I like this picture. First off, his staff having a beholder eye is hilarious. I love that. That's just a really cool little attention to detail thing right there. But I love the way that his eye stalks are casting. So normally, when you're talking about an eye stalk casting a spell, the way that I've heard it described is a beam comes out of the eye stalk, which is what you're seeing here. I like the spell circle aspect to this picture though, around the eye stalk as it's casting the spell. I think that's a really cool thing that they did with this picture, and I might have to use that in some of my games. That's pretty cool. Thankfully, my players don't watch these videos. I 100% have a beholder encounter planned for the next couple of sessions. There's going to be a beholder somewhere thrown in the mix there, if they continue on with a side quest that they had started. But that is, so I might have to use that soon. That is so cool. I like how it's also an old beholder, so I wonder if we're getting new beholder sub races in this player's handbook, or this will probably be in the monster manual, obviously, because I don't think we've ever seen a beholder with a beard. So I'm curious about that. Unless that is supposed to be Xanathar, but I don't think he has a beard.
None of these spells give you anymore a second pool of hit points. They now do something that actually I talked publicly about years ago, where I shared publicly that I wished we had made those spells give you temporary hit points, and so now that is indeed what they do. So
we talked about this a little bit in the Druid video, near the end of the video. Giving temporary hit points instead of giving a HP pool like you currently do for transformation spells weakens the spell, which isn't always a bad thing. So, for example, the Circle of Moon Druid, it might be good that they don't have such an easy way to double their hit points. But it also means that there's going to be a bigger likelihood of people going down in combat. And the druid, some people might not like it as much because it doesn't feel as powerful. For things like polymorph, I think that's a little bit better that you have a temporary HP pool so that you're not polymorphed for too long. But sometimes you might want to be polymorphed for a long time. I don't know if polymorph is going to end after that temp HP runs out, or if it's going to be like wild shape where you can die in that form, because that might be a problem.
Rather than you essentially having two different hit point pools, your own pool and the pool of the form that you have transformed into, you now keep your own hit points, and instead you get some temporary hit points based on the form that you are shapeshifting.
So some comments on the Druid video on D&D's channel does point out that these temporary hit points do not seem as significant as the HP pool, which is why a lot of people are not liking it right now. I think there's pros and cons to it. It's not a bad idea, but I understand a lot of people are not going to be happy with it.
Into. We have also standardized the wording that we use for some of our spells. So we use shape-shifting wording much more consistently for any spell that involves shape-shifting. We implement the new emanation area of effect. We also are much clearer about how we're using various conditions, damage types, and so forth. I think what people are going to see when they dig into this vast sea of spells is not only a whole lot of fun, some of it new or old fun that has been enhanced, but they're also going to see that the entire collection is simply easier to deploy at the table, whether you are playing a player character or you're the dungeon master playing a spellcaster, because one of the things that is always important to remember about the spell chapter is, unlike, say, the class chapter, which is the biggest chapter in the player's handbook, the spell chapter, which is the second largest, isn't just for players.
Yeah.
The spell chapter is the repository of spells for the whole core game. And the dungeon master often needs that part of the player's handbook just as much as the players do. And so there are parts of that spell chapter that are primarily for the DM. A great example of that is a spell like Guards and Wards. It is extremely rare for a player character to ever cast Guards and Wards, but a dungeon master's NPC spellcaster might cast it to make their dungeon that much harder to infiltrate.
Well, we do have bastions now.
Yes.
In the Dungeon Master's Guide, so that might actually get a little bit more use in the future.
Exactly. But even a spell like Guards and Wards, we have fine-tuned in the new Player's Handbook. Wish has been fine-tuned. The Wish spell now has some new default options built into it, and also the spell has more to say now about what the ramifications could be of you using the spell. And there is even in the spell now specific guidance on what happens should you try to use the spell to affect either the city of Sigil or the Lady of Pain. And so please...
I love a Lady of Pain caveat.
Yes,
and a wish spell.
There is a specific Lady of Pain bit now in the Wish spell.
Okay, I'm so happy the Wish spell is getting updated. I am in the game that I'm running. We just had the deck of many things come out. I love the deck of many things. One of my players pulled the card that grants you a use of the Wish spell. So we had to read the Wish spell for the table. And it is confusing, to say the least. It's like, it can do these couple of things. These are the easy things it can do. It can do harder things up to your discretion. It could fail. It doesn't really explain itself very well. So I'm happy that they're fixing that. I think it is hilarious that they have a caveat for Sigil and the Lady of Pain. I like the idea that Sigil should be blocked, because it's like the hub for the different dimensions of D&D, the different planes of D&D. That is the point of Sigil. The Lady of Pain, that's just funny because the Lady of Pain is technically like the leader of Sigil, from what I remember. I don't know a lot about the Planescape setting, but I'm pretty sure she's like the leader of Sigil, but she doesn't want to be referred to the leader of Sigil. But she's insanely powerful, but she doesn't want to get worshipped as a god. And there's just a lot of confusion with the Lady of Pain, where it's like, oh, she's insanely powerful, but she doesn't want people to acknowledge how powerful she is. But people have to respect her when they come to Sigil, and there's a lot of stuff there. So I think that's really funny.
And many of the spells, even when they don't have much of a functional change, sometimes have a fun bit of flavor change, whether it's the bit about the Lady of Pain in the Wish spell, or it's new details in the component part of the spell, or new flourishes about what happens if the spell fails. So I look forward to people spending time with the
First bard image. Look at that. Is that Tasha's hideous laughter? Or is that the Otto's irresistible dance? I think it's one of those two. God, that's so cool.
new spell chapter.
I love that design too. It gives like Harlequin or Jester vibes.
Discovering the number of fun Easter eggs and winks and other things that we have planted throughout the chapter for people to enjoy over the years ahead, because we know the spell chapter is a chapter that people come back to over and over and over again. And so we like to make sure there are goodies for people to discover there. And we have a very similar approach to the magic item chapter of the Dungeon Master's Guide. Of we put in not only, the sort of the things people expect to find there, but also we like to put in fun little surprises.
Is there any other spell that really stands out to you that is like, oh, this is so much better? This is going to get you so much more.
Two that right away, looking at the list, that I encourage people to look at to really see the kind of new fun that we've added are Chromatic Orb and Cloud of Daggers. So I'll start with Chromatic Orb. In that spell, it still lets you choose damage type like you could before.
Right.
But the thing that we added in is now the orb can bounce. And so, so now it can potentially bounce from one target to another. So that's what I mean, that this chapter is filled with...
That was a really cool picture of Chromatic Orb with it bouncing between the two enemies. It looks like it did ice damage on the first enemy, lightning damage on the second one. That's pretty sick.
It's a fun that we've worked into various spells. Similarly, in Cloud of Daggers, this spell now lets you move it. I, as a player, when I have cast Cloud of Daggers, that is often my main frustration with it, is I cast it and then the monsters move over there.
Yeah.
Or even when I cast Cloud of Daggers in Baldur's Gate 3, I, as a player, I'm like, I want to be able to move it. So when we got to finalizing the spell chapter, we made it so you can now move Cloud of Daggers. We've also made it...
Maybe I'll take Cloud of Daggers now, because that's the most frustrating thing about the spell. It's like a 5-foot area. So you put the daggers in like a square on the board pretty much. On an enemy preferably. And then the enemy walks out of the Cloud of Daggers. The only good way to do it is if there's like a hallway that the enemies have to come down to get into the room that you're in. They would have to walk through the Cloud of Daggers. But then after they walked through it, it's like, oh, the spell is useless now. Like there's no point in it being up after they go through that area of effect.
It so that some spells that were really painful to cast in terms of their action economy are far less painful. I think one of the prime examples of that is Produce Flame, the Druid cantrip. That that cantrip was really painful to set up. Like once you got it going, it could be fun to hurl the fire. Now it is way easier to cast it. And that is actually, funnily enough, another one where it was not only painful to cast in the tabletop game, but when I was playing Baldur's Gate 3, was excruciating to cast in Baldur's Gate 3. And it was actually while playing Baldur's Gate 3, I thought, we are going to redesign Produce Flame so that it will not be, there will not be this much friction to cast this cantrip.
And the art is stunning, and this is one of my favorite things about the art that gives you an example is because often you're showing, of course, the caster, the person who made this spell in the first place, casting the spell. Like Melf is casting Melf's Acid Arrow.
Is that Melf? That makes sense, because Melf stands for male elf, and he's a male elf. But why the heck is he casting Magic Arrow? Or Acid Arrow. Melf's Acid Arrow. That close. It has like a burst effect, right? Like he's going to get hit by acid, isn't he?
As a primarily a warlock player, I'm super excited to see, Armor of Agathis and also, Arms of Hadar.
Oh, that looks
things
sick.
like that shown that I've never seen really.
And those two spells are in the same painting.
Yeah, a lot of these paintings have two spells going off at the same time,
Yep.
and it's fantastic. You see, Everett's Black Tentacles being cast.
By
Oh, that's Everett? God, these guys look cool. I haven't seen the art in prior editions for these like renowned spellcasters, and he looks sick. He has like, it looks like tattoos that are pretty much activating the spell. That's
Yeah,
pretty
by
cool.
Everett. You see Fireball going off and burning a lot of spiders and probably a lot of spiders on the periphery.
Is
And
that
it's
supposed
just
to be
stuff like
Fireball?
that I think helps set up players' imaginations.
Similarly, you'll be able to not only see Magic Missile being cast,
Yeah.
but the wizard who's casting it has mage armor on.
Yeah.
And it's a rare case for us to actually show mage armor. A number of the paintings, in their captions, they'll identify the main spells that are being cast. But there are even a few cases where there are other spells in the image as well that we don't highlight in the caption.
There's a charming painting for scrying where one person is casting scrying to talk to their mom, and their mom is casting scrying to see them. So it's like FaceTime.
And that is specifically what I asked for. So with that image, when working with Emi Tanji, the art director, as well as Josh Herman on this book, I specifically said, I really want a scrying image where it's the wizard and his mom FaceTiming.
Yeah.
And that's what we got.
It's very charming. Every piece of art in this entire book is telling a story, and that's what I appreciate. Or it's a moment in the adventure, or right before combat, or after combat, or it's demonstrating something you always kind of wondered about. So I love seeing spell art anytime I can.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's the daylight spell. And it's a cool way to showcase the daylight spell. I think that's the daylight spell.
And in the history of D&D, sometimes it's not been clear what that spell is in art.
Yes.
All the way back through the editions. Sometimes it's just a laser beam, but not defined. But now you're getting definition.
If we could have added another 32 pages to the book, we would have had even more art. But the book was already 384 pages with more art than a player's handbook has ever had before.
Well, luckily we have a lot more books coming out after this too. So if you need more spell art, there might be more spell art in those.
When you pre-order the
Okay. So, great video. I like some of the changes that they've made. Like I said, I'm unsure about the guidance thing. I do want to know how they improved resistance in True Strike to make them usable. Because anybody that's tried to use them in D&D or in Baldur's Gate knows that it's just kind of a waste of an action to use those. True Strike, pretty much, it's an action to give you advantage on your next action, which is not great. I do love that D&D is giving props to Baldur's Gate. So like they talked about how Produce Flame is the reason that they realized they needed to change the way that the spell worked or the cantrip worked. And then they talked about how there was another spell that it was like, oh, Baldur's Gate made me realize, oh, it was Cloud of Daggers, the one that I also agreed with that criticism of the 5e Cloud of Daggers, where they were like, yeah, in game, in D&D, it was a frustrating spell. And then it was even more frustrating when I got to use it in Baldur's Gate 3, which is my experience as well. I tried to use it in Baldur's Gate 3 and could not enjoy the spell because it's just so specific to, oh, the daggers stay in the same place, and your enemies are obviously not going to run into the daggers. It would be stupid for them to run into the daggers. I love that the wish spell is getting an update to make it a little bit more clear. I like the flavoring that they're adding to all of the different spells, and I do love the artwork. I've said that in every single video we've done so far, so I'm becoming a little bit too repetitive, but this player's handbook really stepped up the game with artwork, so I can really appreciate that. I'm a big fan of good art, so I'm happy that they tried to upgrade as much as they could. So other than that, if you guys did like this video, please leave a like on the video. If you want to see these videos more frequently, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when I release a new video. I'm going to be trying to keep up with the videos that D&D is releasing. This catches me up to the current date. That's why the past like 4 videos have been me in the same short. This amazing Corby short that I own. This is one of my favorite shorts right now. Love Corby. They should make Corby into a D&D monster, but I think Corby's owned by Nintendo. Or I don't think. Corby's owned by Nintendo, and Nintendo's a very litigious company, and Hasbro might not want to make that mistake. So, um, so other than that, I hope everybody is having a great day or a great night if it's dark out where you're at. And until next time, peace.